Every story leaves something behind: a whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves. Tonight, we have 3 stories from people who work the night shift, and every single one of them involves something that happened in the dead hours when nobody else was around. Our first story comes from a grocery store stalker in Utah. What he found on the ceiling is something I genuinely cannot explain. The handprint wasn't there at midnight. I know because I'd wiped down the walk-in freezer door myself during my first round. By 2:15, it was there. A full palm print, fingers spread wide, in something that wasn't water. I worked the overnight shift at a grocery store in Ogden, Utah. Not a big chain, one of those regional places with fluorescent lights that buzzed at a frequency you could feel in your teeth. Between midnight and 6 a.m., there were exactly 2 employees in the building. Me and a guy named Dale, who ran the bread aisle and mostly stayed in the back listening to talk radio on a portable speaker. The store was closed to customers. Doors locked, alarms set. Our job was stocking shelves, rotating product, and keeping the place ready for the 5 a.m. open. The first thing I noticed that night wasn't the handprint. It was the smell. Around 1:30, I caught something in the dairy section. Not spoiled milk, something heavier, organic, like wet soil mixed with copper. I checked the drains in the floor. Nothing. I checked the dumpster access door in the back. Locked and sealed. The smell faded after a few minutes, so I moved on. Then I found the handprint. It was on the stainless steel surface of the walk-in freezer door, about 5 feet up. The substance was dark, reddish-brown, still slightly wet. I touched the edge of it with my fingertip, and it smeared. I called out for Dale. No answer. His speaker was still playing in the back room. I could hear some AM host talking about silver prices. I walked to the back room. Dale's speaker was sitting on a stack of bread trays. His jacket was draped over a chair. His car was still in the lot. I could see it through the loading dock window. But Dale was gone. I tried his phone, straight to voicemail. I walked every aisle. I checked the bathrooms, the office, the break room. I even opened the walk-in freezer itself, half expecting something terrible. It was empty, except for pallets of frozen vegetables and ice cream. At 3 a.m., I found a second handprint. This one was on the inside of the front entrance glass. Same substance, same size, but the door was still locked. The alarm was still armed. Nobody had come in or gone out. I called my manager. He didn't pick up. I called the non-emergency police line, and a dispatcher told me to sit tight if I felt unsafe. She said someone could swing by on their next pass. That could be an hour. At 3:20, I heard something from the ceiling. Not the HVAC system, not the building settling. It was a slow, wet drag, like something heavy being pulled across the drop ceiling tiles. It moved from above the dairy section toward the back of the store. I stood completely still in aisle 9 and watched the ceiling tiles flex slightly, one after another, under a weight that shouldn't have been there. I left through the loading dock. I didn't set the alarm. I didn't lock the door. I sat in my car and waited for the police. When they arrived 40 minutes later, they searched the store. They found Dale's phone in the ceiling. The back of it was smeared with the same reddish substance. 2 ceiling tiles near the loading dock were displaced. Dale's car sat in the lot for 3 days before it was towed. He never came back to work. He was never reported missing by anyone because, as it turned out, Dale had no emergency contacts on file. No family in the area. The police filed a report, but I never heard anything else about it. I quit the next morning. I never went back inside that store. But sometimes I think about that ceiling, about whatever was up there, dragging itself through the dark above my head. And I think about how I stood directly beneath it, and it chose not to come down. That one doesn't sit right with me. And the next story might be even worse. This one comes from a CNA who worked overnight at a care facility. What she heard on that intercom, there's no good explanation for it. Someone was calling from room 412, but room 412 had been empty since Tuesday. I was a night shift CNA at a long-term care facility in eastern Pennsylvania. Not a hospital, one of those places with a nice name that families pick out of a brochure. 3 floors of residents, most of them elderly, most of them non-ambulatory. The night shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and on a good night, you had 4 CNAs covering the whole building. On the night I'm talking about, we had 3. One had called out. The call light system was old. Each room had a button the resident could press, and it would trigger a chime at the nurse's station along with a small intercom light. You could press a button at the station and speak directly into the room. Most of the time, residents hit the button by accident, rolled over on it, knocked it with an elbow. You'd click in, hear nothing or hear snoring, and clear it. At 1:45 a.m., the panel lit up for room 412. Ward C. I was the only one near the station. I pressed the intercom button and said, "This is the nurse's station. Do you need help?" There was a pause. Then a voice came through. It was quiet, breathy. It said, "I need someone to come in here." The voice was female. Thin. It sounded like an elderly woman, which would have been completely normal, except that room 412 had no one in it. The last resident in that room, a woman named Gladys, had passed on Tuesday morning. The room had been cleaned. The bed was stripped. The call button should not have been functional because maintenance was supposed to disconnect the intercom when a room was turned over. I walked down to Ward C. The hallway lights were on their nighttime setting, which meant every other fixture was dimmed. Room 412 was at the far end, past a fire door that didn't latch properly and always drifted half-closed. I pushed through it and walked to the door. It was shut. I opened it. The room was dark. The bed was bare, just a mattress on a frame. The call button cord hung over the side rail. I picked it up. The button was depressed, pressed in, as if someone was holding it and had only just let go. I cleared the call from the room panel and left. I told myself the button had gotten stuck somehow. At 2:30, it went off again. Same room. I was at the station with another CNA, Marcus. We both looked at the panel. I pressed the intercom. This time, the voice came through faster. "I need someone to come in here, please." Marcus looked at me. He'd heard it too. We walked down together. Same dark hallway, same fire door, same empty room. But this time, the bed was different. The mattress had an indentation in it, a long body-length depression, as if someone had been lying there. The pillow, which I know had been flat when I was there 45 minutes earlier, had a head-shaped impression pressed into it. Marcus didn't say a word. He backed out of the room. I followed him. We closed the door, and he put a piece of tape over the latch, not to lock anything in, just so we'd know if it opened. At 4 a.m., the call light went off a 3rd time. We did not answer it. We sat at the nurse's station and watched the light blink for 11 minutes before it stopped. In the morning, the day shift supervisor asked why there was tape on room 412. I told her the call system was malfunctioning. She sent maintenance to check it. They told her the intercom in that room had been disconnected on Wednesday. The wiring had been pulled from the junction box. There was no power running to it. The light on the panel shouldn't have been able to turn on at all. Marcus put in his 2 weeks that Friday. I lasted another month before I transferred to day shift. I still think about that voice, how it didn't sound scared. It sounded patient, like it knew eventually someone would come in. I don't know what to make of that one, but this last story is the one that disturbed me the most. It comes from a hospital security guard in Arizona. What was found behind that pillar changes everything about this story. He was standing on level 3 at 2 a.m. and he didn't have a car. I worked overnight security for a hospital in Tucson, Arizona. Not inside the hospital. My post was the parking structure. 5 levels, open air on the top, concrete everywhere else. My job was to patrol each level once an hour, check the stairwells, make sure the emergency call boxes were functional, and watch the camera feeds from a booth on the ground floor. The structure served the hospital staff on night shift and the occasional visitor for the ER. By 2 a.m., most of the cars belonged to nurses and techs who wouldn't leave until 7. I first noticed him on the cameras. Level 3, northeast corner, standing between a white SUV and a concrete pillar. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing the wall. His back was to the camera. He was wearing dark clothes, no coat, which was odd because December nights in Tucson get into the low 40s. I radioed my supervisor, Jerry, who was posted at the hospital's main entrance. He told me to do a walkthrough and report back. Standard. I took the elevator to level 3. When the doors opened, I could see the northeast corner from where I stood. The man was still there. Same position, facing the wall. I called out to him, "Sir, this is hospital security. Do you need assistance?" He didn't move. I walked closer. About 30 feet away, I stopped. Something was wrong with his posture. His arms were at his sides, but his hands were turned outward, palms facing behind him. His head was tilted slightly to the left, not like he was looking at something, more like he was listening. I called out again. Nothing. I was about 15 feet away when I noticed his shoes. He wasn't wearing any. His feet were bare on the concrete. They were filthy, not just dirty, blackened, like he'd been walking on asphalt for miles. I keyed my radio. "Jerry, I've got a possible psychiatric patient on level 3. No shoes, non-responsive. Can you send someone from the ER?" Jerry said he'd make the call. I waited. I didn't approach further. I kept my flashlight on him. For 3 full minutes, he didn't move. Then his head turned. Not his body, just his head. Slowly, he turned it to the right until I could see his profile. His eyes were open, wide open. He was smiling. He said, "You're the one who watches the cameras." I didn't respond. I took a step back. He said, "I've been watching you too." Then he turned fully around, and I saw what he'd been facing. On the concrete wall, in what looked like black marker or grease, someone had drawn a layout of my security booth. Not a rough sketch, a detailed, accurate floor plan. The desk, the monitor bank, the position of my chair, the location of the door. There was an X drawn where I sit. I backed up to the elevator. He didn't follow me. He just stood there, smiling, watching me go. I got back to the booth and locked the door. On the camera, I watched him. He walked to the stairwell on level 3 and descended. I switched to the level 2 camera. He appeared, then level 1, then the ground floor. He walked out of the structure and across the parking lot toward the road. He never looked back. 2 ER techs arrived on level 3 about 10 minutes later. They found the drawing on the walls. They also found something I hadn't seen on camera. Behind the pillar where the man had been standing, there was a plastic bag. Inside was a printed photograph of me sitting in the booth, taken through the booth's window. The timestamp on the back was from 3 nights earlier. He'd been coming to the structure before that night. He'd been standing outside my window, close enough to take a photo, and I never saw him. I never heard him. The camera footage from that earlier night was reviewed. At 3:12 a.m., a figure appears at the edge of the ground floor camera frame, standing outside the booth window for almost 4 minutes. I'm visible inside, looking at the monitors. I never once looked up. I don't work nights anymore. I don't work security anymore. The man was never identified. The photo was taken with a disposable camera, no prints. The hospital added a lock to the booth's exterior door after that, but it didn't matter. He'd already been that close. He'd already known exactly where I sit. And the thing that still gets me, the drawing on the wall included a detail I didn't notice until I saw the photos the police took. There was a second X. It was drawn on the outside of the booth door, right where someone would stand if they were waiting for it to open. And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.